Chapter 251, A Well-Rewarded Effort? Nightmare of Death held the tiniest bit of hope inside him as he forcefully logged himself off. The game officials had emphasized about the potential loss that could result from forcefully logging off, but contrary to what was being implied, this loss was akin to a character reverting to a backup file, similar to those single-player games that would load the most recent saved file if people exited them without saving. While this outcome sounded logical, it would naturally pose a huge loophole to the game if things were really that simple. For instance, if Nightmare of Death's equipment, level, and such would revert to how they were by forcefully logging off, would this not become a method to recover things or freely duplicate items? Just imagine if a player transferred his or her equipment to another before forcefully logging off. Many people had naturally thought of this, yet such an incident had never occurred in Parallel World. So far, the occasional flaws that had happened were due to the use of immersion technology and the problems that came with being the first of its kind. Glitches and technical problems that happened in the usual MMOs were far and few in between. Despite knowing this, Nightmare of Death could not help but hope otherwise. When Nightmare of Death nervously logged into the game again after much waiting, it was indeed difficult to log into the game after forcefully going offline. Simply put, the server had too many users playing the game at any given point of time that gathering them into the designated log-off points was no longer a matter of efficiency but an issue of necessity. Therefore, while the system would automatically save the player's data upon forcefully logging off, it was just as how the game officials had put it: certain aspects will not be fully taken care of. This statement was essentially a disclaimer for any lost data that the system might fail to save or record completely due to a player's forceful exit to the game. Naturally, this incomplete or unsaved data referred to lost items or diminished experience points. It was impossible for a player to suddenly gain equipment or for a level 30 character to suddenly become level 40. Nightmare of Death's wish obviously did not come true. When he logged into the game once more, his level and equipment were still the same as before. Since the data reverting to its original state was just a small hope he had, he was only slightly disappointed when it did not happen. Actually, he felt surprised that his level did not drop. He had actually managed to benefit from his forceful log-off. Given that Sword Demon, Gufei, and many enemy players had him surrounded previously, him dying was inevitable, and that death would have caused him to lose 2 more levels. Nightmare of Death based this assumption on the MMOs he had played in the past. Forcefully logging off or getting disconnecting due to power outage would leave a character idle in-game, allowing other players to dish out attacks or deal damage on it. Unexpectedly, Parallel World's system was efficient enough to take the character out of the game entirely upon a forceful log-off. Indeed, this was a VR game that did not suffer from lagging like the other MMOs. Nightmare of Death only felt relieved after ascertaining that his level, experience points, equipment, skill proficiency, etc. had not lost even 1 point. When that was done, he reached into his dimensional pocket next. The color from his face instantly drained. Fishing out his coin pouch and counting its content repeatedly, he could not help but utter, "Fucking hell." There was discrepancy in his character data. After all, the content of Nightmare of Death's coin pouch had lost an entire digit to its original value. Kicking out in frustration, he heard a clinking of metal as his foot got caught. "Those bastards!" Nightmare of Death furiously roared. "They fucking left a trap behind. You guys go to hell." This was actually a mistake. The hunting trap skill in Parallel World would only take effect after getting triggered, so a trap could forever remain buried under the soil if it was not triggered. Only the hunter who had set the trap could remove it. Anyone else would need the corresponding skill to do so. A hunter therefore had to remove the trap he had set up if it was not triggered, otherwise, he or she would not be able to set another trap. Currently, every hunter was only able to set 1 trap. That trap Nightmare of Death trod on was unintentionally left behind by a hunter. Before Nightmare of Death got online, White Leaf Plumage had been feeling depressed for his inability to use the hunting trap skill, generating much laughter from his brothers in arms. Everyone had each set a trap earlier and Nightmare of Death had only triggered 1 of them. This naturally meant that someone among them did not need to remove his. White Leaf Plumage's friends tricked him into thinking that his trap was the one that had been triggered back then. These hunters love to deceive one another, and their greatest enjoyment came from seeing one of their fellows fail to disarm his hunting trap and being forced to come back later in frustration to recover it. It just happened that White Leaf Plumage was among the most gullible members of Forever in Flowers. He probably would not even remember the trap if no one reminded him about it, which just made his nickname Zia by superscript 1 all the more fitting. He was just about to report this matter to a GM, thinking that he had stumbled across a bug, when Nightmare of Death happened to trigger the trap upon getting online. White Leaf Plumage felt extremely thankful once he discovered that his hunting trap was usable again, which was the exact opposite of what Nightmare of Death was currently feeling about them based on his expletive-laden tirade. Nightmare of Death discovered that Goofy had gone offline upon checking the bounty mission log. At present, he no longer had any thoughts of recovering Lasting Sentence and Dying Breath and was instead thinking of ways to hide from Goofy. Thus, he hurriedly contacted his colleagues in the gaming workshop to help him erase his park value. Nightmare of Death was practically naked at this point and was only at level 36. He no longer had the capacity to do missions by himself, so he could only ask his colleagues for help regarding this. In return, his co-workers tried their best to console the crestfallen Nightmare of Death. "We'll find a chance to exact vengeance on that guy for you." As colleagues in the same gaming workshop, their level of unity and discipline was better than what was found in guilds and mercenary groups. Compared to the average players, they were also more skillful and were the sort that the term professional player was applicable. Goofy might be an undeniably formidable existence in Parallel World, yet they were not the least bit hesitant to confront him. However, when these gaming professionals arrived at the bounty assignment hall, they discovered that Nightmare of Death still had a bounty mission, which could not be discarded. Nightmare of Death was a little out of it from his ordeal, so he had actually forgotten about this fact. Moreover, his mind was currently busy thinking of ways to resolve the matter regarding Lasting Sentence and Dying Breath. Should he give an honest account of the matter and hope for leniency? Nightmare of Death was the sort who would only shed tears when he saw his casket squared. With this bit of grim determination, he decided against mentioning the matter and chose to turn himself in over to Yunjuan City's prison. This day thus ended without much disturbance on the forums. Indeed, Goofy only flaunted about the top-grade equipment to his friends. Going to the forums to brag about his equipment acquisition was not his style, after all. In fact, his style was the exact opposite. This, just like how he had helped Sword Demon recover Frost memories from Icy Ocean, Goofy asked his friends for a way to return the looted top-grade equipment back to the original owner. All the experts present at Ray's Bar were astonished when they heard this. Returning a lost property to its real owner had always been a matter of how valuable it was. While it was easy to return $10 to someone, it would be the opposite if it involved $1 million. It was the same in a game. Those with conscience would be able to easily return average equipment that they had casually picked up, but it would be difficult if the equipment in question was something as exceedingly rare as Lasting Sentence and Dying Breath. There might even be people who would betray their friends for these items, much less if the owner of such items was someone who could not even hope to beat Goofy for generations. More importantly, this was just a matter of returning lost property to its owner. In the eyes of these experts, the items were obtained by Goofy through PvP, so it was clearly an effort well rewarded. Even someone as upright as Sword Demon thought so. The entire gaming community would certainly share this sentiment when it came to such matters. Goofy's thought process was really too foreign and ridiculous to gamers. Who knows who originally owned those items? Are you planning to ask Nightmare of Death about that? Brother Assist asked. That's a possible option. Goofy considered. Brother Assist was speechless for quite some time before finally saying, "And if they belong to Nightmare of Death?" Brother Assist thought Goofy would struggle over this question, yet the latter was apparently more decisive than that since he immediately replied, "I would naturally take them for myself." Everyone was truly speechless now. While any gamer would think Goofy was being pedantic, his way of handling this issue is truly the most morally upright. So these few experts with Goofy felt somewhat embarrassed to persuade him otherwise. "Ask Nightmare of Death, then." "Let's see if he would tell you," Brother Assist said in the end. "That will be quite difficult. When I got online today, his park value was already cleared off. If he is someone who can easily be found, the whole city will certainly be in uproar to chase after him." Gufei said. When Gufei had first found out Nightmare of Death's IGN and his vile deeds, Brother Assist had posted it on the forums, causing others to say that Nightmare of Death was that one person that they would pursue for life. This was one of the reasons Nightmare of Death and company had abruptly halted their operations in Yunjuan City. In the end, no one had hunted for them. Although a city in-game was nowhere as large as a city in reality, its population was still over hundreds of thousands. Searching for one player was truly a difficult task. Having just the person's IGN did not help the situation, either. Without a picture or a location, looking for him was as good as finding a needle in the haystack. This was how the matter had been left unsettled and how Nightmare of Death had managed to continue living his in-game life in relative peace. He was even at level 40 before his fight with Gufei. Let Brother Assist create a thread on the forums to get the equipment's owner to contact Gufei personally, Royal God Call suggested. A lot of owners would surely be turning up, young Master Han said. Get them to state the equipment's traits. Then, who else but the real owner will know of these? Royal God Call said. We do. Nightmare of Death and his gang will be able to do so as well. You youngsters truly have yet to experience the world in its entirety, you're so naive. Young Master Han mocked Royal God Call before continuing, or maybe you're hoping Miles will do that? That way, you can have someone pretend to be the owner of Lasting Sentence and Dying Breath? That's so shameless and despicable. Everyone exclaimed. That's what he said. I never even thought of that. Royal God Call indignantly pointed at young Master Han. We know. Gufei ruffled Royal God Call's hair. He's the only one who could possibly think of such a method this quickly. May God have mercy on this evil man, so he won't head straight to hell upon his death. War Without Wounds pretended to pray for young Master Han. TSK. I was just trying to tell him that finding the original owner is an extremely daunting task. It's better to exchange the items for more liquor and enjoy yourself, young Master Han said disdainfully. I'll just find the solution to this myself, Gufei declared as he vacated his seat. Chapter 252, Lasting Sentence and Dying Breath's final location. Gufei's solution to the problem was to look for that person. Once he located that person, he might be able to find the owner. This was the most viable solution he could think of. Gufei was of course not looking for Nightmare of Death. Given his relationship with him, Gufei was certain that the latter would only provide him with the exact opposite of what he needed if he were to approach him for anything. If he told him he was looking for the looted equipment's owner, Nightmare of Death would surely tell him that someone had died during the Ice Age with his whole family. Gufei was looking for Icy Ocean. Icy Ocean had previously told him about joining Nightmare of Death's organization to scam the scammers, and Gufei had never once contacted her for this. Looking back, Gufei had managed to become friends with many people in this game from all walks of life. Gufei recalled Sword Demon's complicated expression upon meeting those sleazy bags of Forever in Flowers. Gufei did not have many friends since he had spent most of his younger days practicing Kung Fu. He had never gone through the usual schooling process, so he had had little interaction with people outside his small social circle. It was only when he had gotten older that he started meeting people in the martial arts circle. The Kung Fu world was small to begin with, though, if even the martial arts family of Gu had few practitioners in them, how many more would there be in others? This inherently small circle made it difficult for him to meet new people, much less people around his age. Meeting people his age that he could interact and chat with in a friendly manner was a difficult task altogether. Even if he did meet someone his age, they would most likely only find themselves sparring first and parting ways after. It was as if Gufei had chosen Kung Fu to be his lifelong partner, spending his 25 years of life with it. Even in the school he was teaching, Gufei's relationship with his fellow teachers was only as colleagues. No one out there seemed to share a common language with him. In Parallel World, he and everyone else were connected to one another by the game. Besides, many leaders of large guilds were vying for Gufei's friendship to get his help in their fight for dominance in the game. Even now, they were striving hard to curry favor with him and have him join their respective guilds. There were even those whose pursuit of women had them putting Gufei on a pedestal. Of course, this bit was referring to the Forever in Flowers players who saw Gufei as their love mentor. There were also those who stood at the apex of their respective fields, The mercenaries of young Master's elite had dragged Gu Fei along with them to regard the rest of the players with contempt. There were the Amethyst Rebirth ladies as well. This bevy of ladies enjoyed gossips so much that even Gu Fei was once the center of their chatters. All of these connections were formed through serendipitous encounters. Besides these people, there were those like Coward Savior who were more than willing to talk about Kung Fu with Gu Fei, albeit their conversation was often one-sided with Gu Fei doing all the talking as Coward Savior had meager knowledge of Kung Fu. In fact, the two's relationship was less of a discussion among equals but more of a teacher and student. Finally, there was Icy Ocean. Just like him, she had a hobby that was frowned upon in reality and could only suffer the pain of it. Still, her hobby was swindling and his was Kung Fu. Wait a minute. How are these two things related again? Gu Fei got distracted. After setting a time and place to meet Icy Ocean, Gu Fei opened his friends list and saw that his students were starting to come online. Once the last student's IGN lit up, Alpha represented all his classmates to greet Gu Fei. Soon, the rest of them started vomiting all sorts of requests, such as carrying them for a quest or to grind levels, giving them money, equipment, or scrolls, and so on. Gu Fei had seen through their intentions. These students were probably often oppressed by their teachers that they were now getting back at them by extorting as much as they could from him, who was also a teacher. He had made these students march in neat rows while calling out a cadence yesterday, yet they had hardly been deterred by that. "Are you guys done with your homework?" Gu Fei asked them, instead. "Teacher, it's the weekend," the students reasoned. He did not know if they had privately discussed this beforehand to take advantage of the fact that the following 2 days were a weekend to viciously pester him into helping them. Gu Fei was not exactly bothered by this, as he himself did not put much importance to those things in game. They were his students, after all. Letting them benefit from good things was no big deal. He had already given them equipment before, and he was rather broke right now. Should he bring them to grind levels? There were over 20 of them. There was hardly a grinding map in Yunju City that could accommodate them all. As for questing, he had never carried someone for a quest before. The main issue about that stuff was traveling. He was naturally willing to represent them in a PvP, but he was clueless on how to help them with the traveling aspect. He supposed that taking the lead would be necessary if they had a poor sense of direction like a royal god call. However, those who wanted him to carry them for a quest probably had similar intention as those skirt chasers of Forever in Flowers, to travel with girls around this VR world. The students were pretty smart. Knowing that it would be impossible for Gu Fei to help 20 plus of them to grind levels together, they evenly split themselves into 2 groups to have him take turns in carrying them. They cared not for the experience points that they would sacrifice if Gu Fei carried them, as their goal was to simply extort as much as they could from their teacher. This could not be called exploitation if their target did not lose something at all, so their teacher could not hope to punish them for it by making them run laps around the school field. Gu Fei did not mind this in the least, but he happened to have something on right now. Thus, he told the students to meet him a bit later as he made his way over to the fountain at Yunju City's central square. Gu Fei immediately spotted Icy Ocean when he got to the place. This particular lady was always wearing strange outfit. Gu Fei knew now that she was an archer, yet she was currently in mage robe with an archer cloak hidden beneath. Otherwise, how could it be explained why Icy Ocean's cowl fit her snugly? Only a thief cloak would fit a player like a hoodie. Gu Fei waved at her as he walked over. "How rare of you to initiate contact with me." "What's up?" Icy Ocean asked a friend. "How did that thing last time go?" Several days had passed since Icy Ocean got slain, but she had not contacted Gu Fei even once. The whole situation had been a misunderstanding, and Gu Fei had deliberately refrained from helping her, making him feel somewhat regretful afterward. "Never mind that. That kind of thing happens a lot. I even got attacked by someone before coming here," Icy Ocean said as she fished out a loaf of bread from her dimensional pocket. Slowly munching on it, Icy Ocean steadily replenished the HP she had lost from being stabbed. Gu Fei did not plan to get involved with the disputes Icy Ocean had gotten herself into due to her career choice, so he just went straight to the point. "Are you still mixed in with that crowd of equipment looters?" "Oh, them? Their business has fallen on hard times after, so I'm barely contacting them now. Still, I exchange words with them from time to time," I heard you messed Ziakan up quite bad yesterday. Icy Ocean said. Nightmare of death? He deserved it, Goofy said indifferently. Huh? So why are you looking for me? Info to continue your hunt? Icy Ocean asked coldly, saying, I'm not gonna reveal anything. He's only trying to make a living, so what's the point of going that far? Make a living? Goofy could not understand what she meant. This is their job. They are part of a gaming workshop, and they get paid by their superior for the equipment they loot, Icy Ocean explained simply. Oh, that's not an easy line of work, Goofy said. Especially after they met you, Icy Ocean chuckled. He's rather unlucky, perhaps. It's better for him to find another line of work. Goofy said apathetically. Seems you're looking for me for another matter. Icy Ocean was quick on the uptake as she immediately realized that Goofy did not plan to continue serving justice on the organization. Yeah, actually, Nightmare of Death dropped equipment when he got killed yesterday. The thing is, I have no idea where he looted such precious equipment, Goofy began. So you're looking for the owner to return the equipment? Goofy nodded his head in confirmation. You're really too righteous. Looking at you sitting on your high horse makes me feel so very small. Icy Ocean sounded sarcastic, yet her face remained expressionless, making it difficult to guess her real thoughts. The item. What is it? Icy Ocean asked. Goofy nonchalantly took one of the two top-grade daggers out and handed it over to her. Icy Ocean glanced at it before asking, aren't you afraid that I'll run off with this dagger? Nope. Goofy was holding a sword in his hand. Killing me won't do you any good, I've still got the dagger on me, Icy Ocean taunted. Run off, then. Goofy merely smiled. Icy Ocean did not move and instead returned the dagger to him. I've never seen this equipment before. Oh? While Goofy sounded skeptical, he knew that she had no reason to hide this matter from him. I believe only Ziakan can tell you where he got the equipment, Icy Ocean said. What do you mean by that? Goofy asked. I can confidently say that I know most, if not all, of the equipment that they've managed to loot. And yet, I've never seen this green tier equipment before. It must have intentionally been hidden by someone. According to you, Nightmare of Death has dropped it. In that case, it's very likely that he has kept this for himself, Icy Ocean explained. Does that mean only he knows who dropped it? It is also possible that he has not looted it from anyone. They are an organization of professional scammers. They only target players after ascertaining that they have valuable equipment in them. In such a situation, it's just not possible for any of them to stash away equipment without the knowledge of others, Icy Ocean continued to say. Perhaps, it's something they have no prior knowledge of, and it accidentally dropped when the person got killed? Goofy proposed. The only reason someone won't use this sort of top-grade gear is when he or she plans to sell it. Since that person wasn't planning to use it, why would he or she leave such precious equipment in the dimensional pocket instead of putting it in the warehouse for safekeeping? Icy Ocean reasoned. That makes sense. What do you make of it, then? Maybe, he got it from fighting a boss or a chance drop from a quest, which Ziakan decided to greedily keep for himself. I don't think there's a need for me to explain his reasoning for doing such a thing. Yeah, I get it. Goofy nodded his head. That's why I think only Ziakan can tell you who the original owner is. Do what you will with this information. Icy Ocean finished. Guess that means I'm the owner of it now. Hee hee. Goofy declared while looking at the dagger in his hand. Aren't you lucky? Okay, I'm leaving now. See you tomorrow, Icy Ocean said. Tomorrow? Goofy asked, nonplussed. Tomorrow is the finals for the mercenary PvP tournament, right? Oh, are you in the Black Hand mercenary group? Goofy was surprised. HMPH. You better be careful. I'm very despicable. Icy Ocean raised her hand and made a killing gesture toward Goofy before turning to leave. Despicable, huh? Goofy repeated to himself. Chapter 253, The relationship between teacher and student. After separating with Icy Ocean, Goofy took his time doing bounty mission while he ignored his students' pestering. When Goofy got online today, he received the system notification about failing his bounty mission for Nightmare of Death due to the latter successfully erasing his park value. Goofy's consecutive completion streak had thus been broken again, making him wonder when he would attain the 200 consecutive completion achievement for bounty mission. The street Gufei took to head toward the bounty assignment hall was even blocked by some people. As more and more players joined the game every day, all sorts of trends would start among the players. These players that formed a blockade before Gufei today was precisely one of these trends that had taken Yanjuan City by storm recently. Everyone knew that dying with park points on one's head was an easy way to drop equipment, so some people were now picking up bounty mission for the purpose of looting the target's equipment with their friends. It was an evil thing to do, and this was the first time Gufei had faced such a situation. Although he usually did bounty mission, it had been quite some time since he had park value on him. Now, he just happened to run into these players who were looking to entertain themselves with this despicable activity over the weekend. A park value of over 10 points. He was bound to drop lots of items when he died. Quite a few people happily took Gufei's bounty mission and rushed to find him. The players immediately used appraisal on Gufei once they saw him. They could not get any details about his black, mage robe, and Gufei's sword was inside his dimensional pocket, but his pair of boots was enough to cause these men to drool. After checking his equipment, they eagerly shouted toward Gufei, "Stop right there!" Bounty mission. They had copied this style from Gufei, the top expert in the business of bounty hunting. Gufei felt stunned. Not knowing the real intention of these players before him, he treated them as players who were earnestly doing bounty mission. Gufei did not want to make things difficult for these players who shared his passion, so he decided against fighting them and turned tail, instead. "Quickly give chase!" The players yelled at one another as Gufei slowly disappeared from their sight. "Fuck, he's too fast. His boots are really amazing." Someone sighed. "Damn, I told you to slay him directly, why did you have to warn him like that?" Someone said, feeling discontented. "Let's just chase after him. He can't possibly clear off his park value so soon." With that, they continued their pursuit of Gufei. Gufei kept doing his bounty mission, occasionally catching glimpses of some people hot on his heels. Since Gufei's movement speed was too fast for them, whenever these men arrived at his latest coordinates, they only ever saw the shadow of his back. To make matters worse, when they finally caught up to Gufei, he happened to just finish off his target. As the men rushed forward to attack him, Gufei smiled brightly at them before disappearing in a white flash. "Wait, what just happened?" Scratching their heads in puzzlement, they continued to chase after Gufei's coordinates. Gufei eventually erased all his park value. Meanwhile, the men ended up running around breathlessly without even managing to get within 30 meters of Gufei. Without his park value, Gufei happily came up to them and said, "We are born of the same roots, why must there be enmity between us?" Superscript 1. What Gufei meant to say was that they were all players doing bounty mission, so there was no need for them to antagonize one another. The players, meanwhile, came to an erroneous realization. "Fuck, so you're also in this line of work. No wonder your park value was high. Since he's a colleague in a sense, we'll just put this matter behind us." This was what the men were thinking inside as they smiled at Gufei. "Let's work together if there's a chance." This was just something they had said out of courtesy. Since anything the players gain would be distributed among the party members, they would usually do this sort of activity together with their close friends. Adding a stranger into the group would simply result in the pie being divided further. Gufei, for his part, was thinking that bounty mission was doable alone, so he could not fathom why players would need to work together for it. But since they invited him, he felt obliged to nod in response. And so just like that, both parties reached an understanding, although the reality was far from the truth. The bunch of men could not help but think, "He's truly well versed in this matter, immediately accepting our offer once cooperation is broached. Really, he's someone with no underlying intention." With that, the two parties went their separate ways. The message notification of Gufei had been ringing non-stop due to his students urging him to hurry. Ignoring the incessant binging sound was a skill he had honed after joining Amethyst Rebirth. He no longer feared receiving many messages and merely skimmed through them before replying. Coming. Over by Yunliao Farm outside Yunjuan City, the students who had split into two groups were having a hard time grinding. Yunliao Farm was considered as a hellish grinding map of Yunjuan City, and with the increase in the player base, it naturally continued to be such a place. Fortunately, There was a balance in the high and low level players of Ultimate Class 3 Guild. With such a group composition, they were able to bully some of the grinding players in the farm and even managed to claim 2 grinding spots for themselves by winning duels. Dueling had become an informal way to settle disputes over grinding spots between players in Yunjuan City. However, the situation had become more troublesome at the current stage of the game. The experienced gamers that had joined Parallel World after its official release would often look for veteran players to back them up, just like how the entire Ultimate Class 3 depended on its highest level member, Alpha, for any fight over a territory in Yunliao Farm. Right now, the party that the students had previously bullied found a powerful backer, a level 40 player. Of course, the said player was more than capable of bullying Alpha in return. There was no need to elaborate on the duel's outcome. Just like how Alpha bullied level 20 players, the opponent this time around thoroughly suppressed Alpha with a few moves. The Ultimate Class 3's members ran to other spots after their grinding spot had been snatched away, but the result was always the same. Alpha would bully lower level players, only to be bullied back when a higher level player appeared. By the time Gufei arrived at the location, Alpha had already been stabbed half dead by a level 40 thief. All the students were glumly sighing by the side of the field as they severely rebuked Alpha for being useless. When they spotted Gufei, all the students felt as if they had seen the light at the end of a long tunnel. Nodding his head and waving his hand at them, Gufei said, "Stand in line. We're headed off to another place." These students' thought process was simpler. They felt that they should at least retaliate against their bullies and considered changing to another grinding spot as a cowardly act. Under the threats of Gufei to make them run 8 laps, the dissatisfied students did not dare to speak out of turn and feebly lined themselves up. Disheartened, they had originally wanted Gufei to come to their aid and alleviate their indignation. Who would have guessed that he would opt to cowardly avoid the quarry? Instead, it was truly a cowardly act of the highest degree. Gufei led the line of listless students away from the grinding map. Alpha, who had some understanding of MMOs, felt his eyes opening wide when he realized that their group is heading toward a higher level grinding map. Yangxia Valley and Yunwu Basin had monsters at level 40. Gufei did not dare to bring them further since the students' levels were far lower than the Amethyst Rebirth ladies. They would practically be useless if they were to head over to a level 50 grinding map. Although Gufei could easily carry them, the efficiency of grinding in such a high-level area would be significantly lower. They were here to grind levels and not to have fun. He was at least thoughtful enough to consider this. The students felt rather anxious when they arrived at the level 40 grinding map. Gufei brought them inside the valley and randomly chose a wide area. He then negotiated with the nearby players, dueled with them, and easily claimed a territory for his. It was rather packed with over 20 students even if they took 2 grinding spots. But having more land was not the issue since Gufei was but one man. With that, he arranged for the lower level students to sit by the side and watch while the higher level students lured monsters. He then tasked those with capability to help fight the monsters. After giving the students their respective roles, Gufei demonstrated to them the insta-killing capability that he was famous for. The students were not the only ones impressed by his display, and even the others around them could help but glance over in shock, making the students feel somewhat proud. The students' levels were all over the place and their experience point distribution was a total mess, but the increase they saw with this monster grind had them beside themselves with joy. This was especially true of the lower level students. The experience points they had gained were truly abundant, allowing them to visibly see their levels increase by leaps and bounds. The students cheered. Just as the students were feeling giddy with joy, Gufei suddenly commanded them, "Line yourselves up." "Why?" the students asked, baffled. "It's over 9 p.m. now, you guys should log off." Gufei answered. "Ah!" the students exclaimed, protesting, "Sir, today is the weekend. Let's play a while longer." Actually, a few of these students were hoping to play the game for the entire night. "Oh, the weekend." Gufei considered the matter. "In that case, you guys can play until 9:30. "Ah!" the students moaned loudly after checking the time, "but it's already 9:27 now." "Yup. I've been lenient with you guys since it's the weekend." "At 9:30, you guys still have some time left to head back to the city. We'll designate that as the time for you guys to enjoy yourselves. Still, I expect you all to be offline by 10 p.m. Gufei said. Ah! The students howled to the heavens, but none of them dared to violate his order. Who among them would dare do so when each of them was in fear of being made to run 8 laps during the PE class? Ultima Class 3 suddenly had an epiphany. As students, a teacher should be someone whom they should do their best to avoid and should try to hide their existence. Even if they were playing the same game, a teacher would always be a teacher and a student would always be a student. Their roles would never change. It was only possible for both sides to abandon their roles if they did not know one another personally, like Gufei and Royal God Call. Since they had a teacher-student relationship with Gufei in reality, this was something the game would not change. Even if there was a teacher who would willingly ignore this sort of connection, Ultima Class 3 knew that this would never happen with teacher Gufei. He might just be a PE teacher, but Gufei was known for being more serious than the other teachers. Physical education was a class that put no great emphasis on seniority. Grading for this sort of class was often more casual, and if anyone could not meet the academic expectation, the teacher in charge would be happy to adjust to the student. Gufei was different. He was the only teacher who did everything by the book. Undoubtedly, they must have been blind for approaching him in the first place. The problem was already here, and they had no way of running from it. Now that they thought about it, Gufei treated everyone rather well despite his strict limitation over their gaming time. After they expressed their frustration on the guild channel, they pitifully asked Gufei, "Sir, will we be grinding here tomorrow as well? Tomorrow's no good. I have to fight in the finals of the mercenary PvP tournament," Gufei answered with a faraway look in his eyes. Chapter 254, The Not-So-Brotherly Gufei. On Saturday, the finals of the mercenary PvP tournament and the guild vs guild tournament were underway. The players who were still competing in either tournament were seizing every chance they could find to further improve themselves. Those on the verge of leveling up were doing their best to make it happen by zealously grinding for experience points. Those close to attaining the next level in their skill proficiency did what they could to achieve it as well. Still, the most straightforward method to improve one's fighting capability by leaps and bounds before the matches start was to acquire wondrous equipment. Young Masters Elite just happened to stumble across this sort of equipment. Lasting Sentence Dying Breath was undoubtedly an over-leveled one weapon, and it was even green tier. Gufei made efforts to locate its original owner, yet he now returned to tell his fellow mercenaries that the equipment now belonged to him upon learning that Nightmare of Death was its owner. These mercenaries did not comment on this further. Given Gufei's track record, none in Young Masters Elite saw him as a man of utmost integrity. Now that it had come to this, a beast dressed in finery squared, a man who is saintly only on the outside. These were the thoughts running through their heads. None of the present men dared to voice them, though, as Gufei's sword was conveniently placed on the table before them, giving him easy access to it. "I don't think I can use either Lasting Sentence or Dying Breath." Gufei sighed as he fiddled with the 2 daggers. "Look." Extending the right hand holding Lasting Sentence, he said, "The green glow isn't very obvious, so it probably means that my dagger aptitude is far from sufficient." Gufei had experience in such things. His Moonlit Nightfalls was purple tier equipment, and the glow for its physical attack attribute depicted on the item window was worlds apart from the glow for its magic attack attribute. At a glance, one could tell that the latter was glowing more densely. The density of a weapon's glow was the system's way of reminding every player of the insufficiency or sufficiency of his or her aptitude. Lasting Sentence was really incompatible with him. Besides the dim glow of the words for its physical attack attribute, the dagger's additional traits were barely emitting the greenish glow, looking entirely nondescript. Gufei then extended his left hand holding Dying Breath. "This one is even worse. Besides its name being lit up, everything else is dimmed. Is this because I don't have the corresponding skill for dual wielding?" The experts looked at his 2 hands back and forth before cursing. "Look, your ass. We can't even appraise them." Put the daggers down on the table. The appraisal skill could not appraise top-grade equipment beyond its rank. For an item's description to be viewable, the person or owner had to hold it to his or her hand or display it using vendor mode. Everyone merely wanted Gufei to put the daggers on the table and show their descriptions using vendor mode, yet Gufei boldly tossed the daggers on the table and gestured for them to inspect the items. The experts picked the daggers up and took turns inspecting them. They were even casually competing with one another. "Hey, look! It's pretty green, yeah? Nah, mine's greener. See? Mine's the greenest. Gufei controlled his temper from erupting. They were just complaining about not being able to appraise the items moments ago, yet they were now competing with one another on who could make the items glow deeper. Sword Demon was not as proactive as the others, so he got a hold of the two daggers last. Picking one up and inspecting it, he nodded his head approvingly. It's pretty green. He then picked the other one up with the same hand and said, this is pretty green, too. He held both at the same time. Looking at his left hand, he informed, it's not that green in this hand. Looks like one needs to have a dual wield skill. War Without Wounds was delighted when he heard this. Taking the two daggers in his hands, he declared, I can make them glow green in both hands. Are you done with making them glow green? Gufei almost flipped the table in his anger. No, not yet. War Without Wounds shook his head, saying, I can't make them as green as Sword Demon, though. Warriors had access to weapon mastery when they reached level 12. The weapons it covered were plentiful and included the saber, sword, axe, and spear. Bow and dagger were not included in this, though, so only Sword Demon had a bit of dagger aptitude. I don't know if I could fully activate them, either. Sword Demon shook his head. This was the first time these top experts had seen green tier equipment, so none of them knew the level of luminosity to expect when they fully met the dagger aptitude requirement. He turned his head over to War Without Wounds. Are you able to activate the hidden traits? War Without Wounds sighed glumly, no. Seems like its wielder needs to fully fulfill the dagger aptitude requirement. Sword Demon deduced. Let's not talk about aptitude now. These weapons require dual wield skill. Who else has access to that besides berserkers? Royal God Call asked. Sword Demon was quiet for a moment before saying, a thief that chooses to be an assassin will be able to, although he or she will require a skill scroll for it. Gufei asked, can a mage learn it? That. Probably not. Everyone looked at one another for confirmation. While Gufei's question sounded silly, none dared to guarantee its impossibility. Due to such an idea being silly, not one of them bothered to research about it. Hence, they did not have enough proof to refute it. I don't think so, too, Gufei sighed, having some idea of the design limitations and rules for every job class. He waved his hand dismissively and said, Sword Demon can have them, then. Considering how well they understood Gufei's personality, they had already expected for Sword Demon to benefit in all this once Gufei realized his inability to utilize the daggers. Some of them were green with envy. Even Royal God Call could not help but lament, when are you gonna get a bow drop? Royal God Call's bow was relatively new, and he could barely keep his hands off of it mere days ago, but he was the sort of person who was afraid to lose out. So everything paled in comparison for him now with the appearance of lasting sentence dying breath. Sword Demon wore a complicated expression on his face. He was not hypocritical and he really wanted to have lasting sentence dying breath, so he did not reject Gufei's offer. Nonetheless, he felt bad to just accept them like this. I'll pay you for them. Seemed to be quite a difficult statement to make, however. At the end of the day, Sword Demon and Gufei's relationship was not that close. They were neither well acquainted nor unfamiliar with one another, making it difficult for Sword Demon to determine the best response to his offer. It was unknown whether Royal God Call was being thoughtful or insolent, but he blurted out, if you were to sell these daggers, they should at least amount to 2,000 gold coins, right? 2,000 gold coins? Royal, that's a really conservative estimate. Brother Assist suddenly had the look of a fine connoisseur as he said, one look at the daggers and you can tell that they are well beyond the current level of players, so you can't use the market price for them. If you were to sell them separately, lasting sentences damage output is absolutely amazing, especially when you consider the current stage of the game, so its price can easily break into the thousands. Meanwhile, Dying Breath's damage output isn't as outstanding. Still, it can definitely be acknowledged as one of the best top-grade daggers out there. Its price can at least reach 800 gold coins. But if the two were sold as a set, with their fatal blow and innate skill, and given how the price of weapons with access to such skills has always been priced higher, one could at least earn 3,000 gold coins for them. With the two's discussion of the item price, Sword Demon took the cue and said to Gufei, I'll take it that you sold them to me for 3,000 gold coins, Then, I currently don't have that sum, though, so I'll owe you that for now. Goofy smiled. We're friends, no need to be so serious. You can just give me 1800 gold coins as a token of appreciation. 1800 gold coins as a token of appreciation. That's quite the token you quoted. You might as well just give them to Sword Demon. Royal Godcall cried out. He thought that Goofy should have rejected Sword Demon's offer to pay as a sign of his brotherliness and allowed a beautiful resolution to the whole matter, yet he had actually accepted such an offer as a token of appreciation. Kids that don't know anything should just play in a corner. Goofy shooed Royal Godcall by flicking his wrist. Sword Demon was very satisfied with this. However, that's a little too cheap. Let's just round it up to 2000 gold coins, then. I've already said 1800 gold coins, so let's make the amount that much. No more, no less, Goofy firmly said. That was when Sword Demon realized 1800 gold coins were not an amount he had come up out of nowhere but something he had thought of. It would be ridiculous to insist over adding 200 gold coins, so Sword Demon decisively nodded his head before saying, I presently don't have 1800 gold coins, either, so I'll owe the amount to you. There's no rush, Goofy replied casually. No one present made further queries about the matter, but Royal Godcall was not satisfied with such a resolution, so he reached inside his dimensional pocket and tossed a scroll onto the table, slapping the wooden surface as he stared at Goofy. It's a scroll for Lightning Mage. I'll sell it to you for 1800 gold coins, take it or leave it. I'll take it. Goofy picked the scroll off the table and said while unraveling it, I'm without gold coins, too, so I'll owe you that amount first. Pay at the front or, before Royal Godcall could finish her words, he saw a flash of lightning lighted up Goofy's fingertips and disappeared, followed by the scroll disintegrating into ash. Goofy casually dusted his hands off and that was the end of it. Everyone present in the room knew immediately that Royal Godcall's scroll had been used by Goofy. Each of them was dumbfounded but also impressed by Goofy's decisiveness at making the decision. Royal Godcall was stunned silly. His cut-off words moments ago turned into a cracked whisper, did you use it already? He shook from utter disbelief. Yup, I've used it. I'll pay you back once I've got the coins, Goofy replied. Ah! Seeing that Royal Godcall was about to pounce on him from across the table, Goofy hurriedly bade them goodbye, I'll see you guys by the teleportation array. He then darted out of the room. Royal Godcall did not give up easily and swiftly chased after him. But no matter how fast he was still no match for Goofy's blink. By the time he stumbled out of Ray's bar, Goofy had already disappeared somewhere. Royal Godcall stalked back to the room, fuming. He saw Sword Demon wielding lasting sentence dying breath with barely contained eagerness, as if he was envisioning that moment when he fulfilled the dagger aptitude requirement for the utilization of the weapon's full potential. Sword Demon, you don't have to pay miles for them anymore. Just treat it as me exchanging the scroll for the daggers. Royal Godcall pompously placed his arm across Sword Demon's shoulder as he said this, yet the latter merely smiled at him. That's not how it works. How does this work, then? Miles is not being very brotherly. Royal Godcall felt very depressed as he sat down, his expression implying that he had somewhat misjudged Goofy. He's actually doing it for my sake. To prevent me from owing him a favor, Sword Demon explained. Huh? Royal Godcall could not understand what he meant. It's easy to pay back gold coins, but favors are a different story. Sword Demon sighed. Everyone is dealt differently, Brother Assist quipped, saying, Miles treats people in a different manner depending on their personality. He knows just how to handle Sword Demon, so he did that. As for Royal, I think it's best for you to forget owning that scroll in the first place. Chapter 255 The map's underlying intent. Royal Godcall understood the reason behind Goofy's action once he heard their explanations. Since he no longer thought badly of Goofy's action, he cared not whether he got paid by him or not for the electric wall scroll. Brother Assist's analysis was spot on. Goofy indeed had good grasp of their personality and treated them in different ways depending on it. As Goofy sprinted away from the bar, he read the description for his newly acquired skill. Electric wall skill effect, construct a barrier that blocks everything using the destructive properties of lightning. Skill duration, 20 seconds, blocks everything. The system's description for a skill was often exaggerated. Take the fireball spell as an example. It was stated that the spell could burn everything. Gu Fei paid little attention to this and merely chanted, "Electric wall, fall." Lightning spells were indeed true to their nature. Descending Wheel of Flame's speed of descent could not even hold a candle to electric walls. Just as the incantation went past his lips, the air in the direction he had pointed to swiftly crackled and distorted, causing the passers-by to gawk at the unexplainable phenomenon. Thunder pealed, and then, electric current could be seen weaving a web before everyone's eyes, looking absolutely terrifying and destructive. When it came to appearance, the lightning affinity spells looked far more impressive than fire affinities or water affinities. At the moment, electric wall was indeed quite a dazzling sight to behold. Although this wall of electricity spanned for 3 meters, it was not long enough to block off the entire street before Gu Fei. Nonetheless, many pedestrians stopped by to inspect this never-before-seen spell. A bold individual even stepped close to the wall of electricity and lightly touched its crackling surface. A zapping sound was heard as electricity sparked from where his finger and the wall of electricity touched. The player yelped and instinctively drew his finger back. Looking at his status, he exclaimed, "Go down!" Paralyzed. The crowd clamored in surprise for 20 seconds. When the spell disappeared, they all realized that none of them had seen the spellcaster and began to look around for the mage. Unfortunately for them, Gu Fei had long since vacated the area. "This spell consumes so much mana," Gu Fei exclaimed. Electric wall halved his mana with just that one cast. Casting this spell gave him the same feeling when casting Blink, meaning, electric wall was also a spell that a mage could adjust the mana consumption of to tweak its effect. Just like Blink, this spell's effect was dependent on how much mana he invested on it. It appeared that lightning affinity did not have spells, such as Fireball and Descending Wheel of Flames, where the mana consumption could not be adjusted. This was an aspect of the skill tree that set it apart from others. Gu Fei pondered on this uniqueness and wondered if he could incorporate it to his kung fu as he headed toward the teleportation array by the Hall of Mercenaries. At exactly 7 p.m., all the mercenaries participating in the finals of the PvP tournament were gathered by the teleportation array. Young Masters Elite and the Black Hand were not the only groups fighting today, as Waterflower, under Brave Surge's leadership, was also vying for 3rd place against Rainbow Betwixt the Clouds. In truth, the fight for 3rd place was far more intense than the fight between Young Masters Elite and the Black Hand. This was because the system had a special reward for the top 3 mercenary groups. Young Masters Elite and the Black Hand would receive this reward no matter which group won the finals. At most, their final reward would be separated by a grade. As for the loser between Waterflower and Rainbow Betwixt the Clouds, it would receive nothing. Therefore, both groups were hellbent on securing victory. Young Master Han and company happened to meet Brave Surge and his men when they got near the teleportation array. All of them amiably exchanged words of encouragement with one another before teleporting into their respective PvP arenas. The 6 men would usually discuss the members of the opposing mercenary group before a match, but the Black Hand's secretiveness made it harder for Brother Assist to do so today. Without much intel, what he shared about the Black Hand was unusually succinct. The Black Hand has 100 members, and their levels are quite high. It is foolish to consider them as weaker than 4C's mercenary group of traversing 4C's guild. After ranking first for the amount of system-assigned missions the Black Hand has completed, the group recently began engaging in some player-requested missions. From what I've gathered, the group is very professional when doing missions, quotes a reasonable price for every client, and is known for being trustworthy. What Brother Assist said thus far could be considered as information, yet it lacked the essential information that could contribute to their upcoming fight, which was the detailed breakdown of the enemy group's job class composition, status of high-ranking members, and preferred PvP maneuver. It would have been great if they could get a good read of the personality of certain key figures as well. While young Master Han's strategy seemed to always be made on the spot, It was actually set in accordance to the gathered information about the enemies. Take that match with Waterflower Mercenary Group as an example. Seizing victory against the group of over 80 players without much suspense was entirely due to young Master Han's familiarity with its members. Brother Assist was undoubtedly the king of information, with his ability to postulate certain things from the scant amount of gathered information. From their style of executing tasks, this mercenary group's cohesion is high. It is possible for them to show explosive bouts of power, so let's be careful when dealing with them. This is the final match, so let's seriously fight this time. Brother Assist concluded. How can you say this, Assist? Royal God Call was dissatisfied. We've always been trying our best all this while. Do you think this is a shonen manga where we shout, "Let me show you what's true power"? After being beaten black and blue, we've already been doing all we could every match. That's the spirit, keep up the good work. Since the information is insufficient, young Master Han finally deigned to speak. Let's collect information as we fight the match. Then, Miles, Royal, Sword Demon, you three have the clear speed advantage. Close in on the opponents once the match begins and find out if there's anything we can take advantage of. As the three men nodded their heads, young Master Han continued, the rest of us will stay behind to conceive a strategy. Don't expect anything from me, I'm just the bodyguard. War Without Wounds spat sarcastically. Go reset your stat points and become a full agility warrior. Royal God Call said to him sympathetically. Scram! Under the ensuing laughter and admonishment, the countdown began. It was then that Brother Assist noticed something. Not everyone turned up. There are only 87 of them. They're short of 13 men. Oh, that's quite normal. People have a life to live outside this game, after all, everyone reasoned. If there was an urgent matter to attend to in reality, it only made sense for a player to push the game aside for it. The final round of the Mercenary PvP tournament began. The game officials had previously announced that the map for the finals would be special. How differently did they design this map in the end? While the background and scenery looked uniquely fantastic, none of the participants in today's match was here for the view. Young Master Han swept his gaze around and took in the many prominent features of the map. The mountain before him had a breathtaking and imposing peak, a towering existence that was definitely ideal to get a view of the entire map. Over by the other side was a dried-up riverbed. Walking along its sides would perfectly let players advance forward undetected. There were also two identical swathes of woodlands that were separated from each other by a certain distance. Just what was the point of making the map like this? Young Master Han analyzed the terrain before pointing toward the mountain peak. We're headed over there. Vantage point again. Everyone was bored stiff. It was the same thing every time. No, I meant there. Young Master Han was already advancing as he pointed ahead. They could not tell where he was pointing at specifically, but they were sure that it was in the direction of that mountain peak. The 6 men proceeded forward as quickly as they could, not discovering any traces of the enemies along the way. Eventually, they reached the place young Master Han had been pointing. At a distance of 10 meters, the mountain that lay before the 6 men dwarfed them with its towering height. Young Master Han looked around and pointed to a small forest near the base of the majestic mountain, over there. He then proceeded toward it. The 5 others followed him into the forest, still unsure of what scheme he had cooked up this time around. Didn't you want the 3 of us to find more information? Goofy asked impatiently. He had been hoping to perhaps kill off a few opponents as they gathered information, making things far more enjoyable. There's no hurry. The information we need will deliver itself right on our doorstep. Just keep an eye out for it. Young Master Han replied. Eye for what? What anyone can draw from this map's terrain is the importance of taking the high ground. The vantage point that this majestic mountain, which is almost as perfect as I am, provides may decide this match's outcome. 2 mercenary groups of equal combat strength will definitely go against each other's throats for this, young Master Han explained. Do we count as a mercenary group of equal combat strength? Brother Assist asked, nonplussed. Young Master Han smiled. We naturally don't count, but we have the grand kiting strategy on our side. Grabbing the high ground is a must to defeat that strategy of ours, and they'll definitely come here for that purpose. To think your grand kiting strategy will be able to foreshadow this much. Brother Assist sighed in awe. Guess we'll have to wait and see how this goes. Let's observe from this spot while keeping ourselves hidden. Everyone had nothing to do while they waited, so Royal Godcall plucked some leaves and wove himself a straw hat. Admiring his handiwork for a while and thinking that he particularly looked dashing when he put it on, Royal Godcall asked the rest, "Do you guys want one as well?" Not one of them answered him, as they were busy with their thoughts. Sword Demon had 3 daggers on him, lasting sentence, dying breath, and frost memories, and was thinking of how to fight using them. Young Master Han occasionally peeked from the forest while taking a sip from a liquor bottle he had fished out of his dimensional pocket. Brother Assist was the most focused of them all and stared unblinkingly beyond the forest, holding a booklet on his left hand and a quill on his right hand. No one doubted that Brother Assist's hand could write as if it had been injected with 1000 agility points once new information presented itself. War Without Wound's large frame made it difficult for him to hide within the forest, so he tried his best to squat behind a huge tree. He would occasionally look from behind the tree, appearing as if he was taking a dump. Finally, there was Gufei. His black, Mage robe made it harder to spot him from within the dimly lit forest. His weapons were at the ready, and his eyes betrayed a glint of malice even while maintaining an expressionless face. 2 words perfectly described how he looked right now: killing intent. Everyone's so serious. Royal Godcall was affected by their mood. Shifting the straw hat on his head and looking with eagle eye, he kept his eyes firmly fixed ahead. "They're here." The one who discovered their opponents was not Royal Godcall with his eagle eye but young Master Han. He raised his hand and pointed the enemy's direction to them. Everyone had been looking in the wrong direction. Outside the forest, the Black Hands players arrived at the base of the mountain from between the 2 hills. "Are they all here?" Young Master Han asked Royal Godcall. "Let me count." Royal Godcall rubbed his eyes. Despite having the eagle eye skill, the task was not exactly easy for him to accomplish. Chapter 256, I rode in the blind spot while Eagle Eye gave Royal Godcall superb eyesight. Counting all the moving enemies by the base of the mountain was still somewhat difficult for him. A good sense of direction was necessary to account for all the moving players. Unfortunately, Royal Godcall was geographically challenged. Royal Godcall counted the opponents a dozen of times, but even when they had made a full circuit around the mountain, he still had yet to finish the task. War Without Wounds, who had grown impatient by this point, asked, "Are you done counting?" Having found a perfect excuse, Royal Godcall hurriedly shouted at War Without Wounds, "What was that for?" "I was just about to finish my counting, but your question threw me off." Royal Godcall's words made young Master Han realize his mistake for issuing that command and patted the former's back. "It's fine. No need to force yourself." The Black Hands' moving forms all stopped by the base of the mountain. After searching for a way up, they started ascending it. "Is there really a need for everyone to climb up that mountain?" Royal Godcall asked. "That mountain is closer to our spawn point, and we are much more flexible since we have less people in the team. If we also tried taking up that vantage point, we would already be on the mountain peak, creating the perfect situation for us to be surrounded," young Master Han explained. "Oh." Upon hearing his explanation, everyone began to closely observe the direction the Black Hand mercenary group was heading. Their opponents were climbing the mountain in an orderly manner and were showing preparedness to respond to any sudden attack from above. Not splitting their force. This must be the first habit our opponents have adopted during the mercenary PvP tournament. Young Master Han laughed disdainfully. When the men of the Black Hand mercenary group reached the halfway point of the mountain, they hurriedly reorganized their PvP formation and placed the archers at the vanguard. These archers then began peppering the area around them with arrows. "What's that for?" Royal Godcall exclaimed in shock. Young Master Han smiled placidly. "This is the second habit that they've adopted. They are wary of our insta-kill mage." Normally, warriors would be in the front line when advancing forward to protect the low-strength mages and archers from getting killed by a surprise attack. As you have just seen, because of our insta-kill mage, placing warriors at the forefront to tank the enemy's attacks is deemed as pointless. Instead, they have placed their archers at the forefront to beat us in terms of range. They are probably positioned just outside a mage's attack range and are initiating the attacks to prevent Miles from peeking out. As young Master Han said that, He turned his gaze on Gufei. Gufei remained mum for a while before finally saying, "My AO spells may no longer be capable of insta-killing warriors, it's still rather effective to place them in the front line to waste my firepower. You're weirdo for having Twin Incineration as your strongest spell, while your other spells are weak in comparison." Royal God Call eyed him with contempt. Other mages would find it difficult to think that the rest of Gufei's spells would not be op as well after seeing what his basic Twin Incineration could do. Gufei shrugged his shoulders. Twin Incineration also has physical damage, so it's actually more useful. Royal God Call almost coughed up blood. Most mages considered Twin Incineration as the weakest in their spell arsenal. Only Gufei actually thought of it otherwise. As for physical damage, it was only due to his Moonlit Nightfalls that the spell could have physical and spell damage. If not for that, how in the world would his spell have physical damage? Young Master Han smiled. That faulty thinking is actually what we are hoping for them to have. The non-stop hail of arrows of the Black Hands archers in the vicinity allowed the mercenary group to successfully seize the mountain's vantage point. The players who had just done their best to occupy the mountain peak could not help but feel disappointed when no enemies were found in the location. They would really be vomiting out blood if they knew that the entire process of their climb up the mountain had been witnessed and ridiculed by the 6 men within the nearby forest at the foot of the mountain. Once that the Black Hands men secured the vantage point, they began looking all around them for the opponents. "It's going to be hard for them from here on," young Master Han said, adding, "While they can't afford to give up the mountain's vantage point, they also have no choice but to mobilize some men to find us. And whichever team ends up having the less manpower will become victim of our attacks. In this case, the safest and most effective method to this would be to evenly split their force." As young Master Han was saying this, the men on the mountain peak began to move. Although they could not accurately tell how many men there were, the amount of moving men was clearly different from what young Master Han had predicted. In fact, all the men seemed to be making their way down the mountain peak. "Ha ha ha ha. You've guessed strongly. Everyone's descending the mountain." Everyone ridiculed young Master Han for his faux pas, yet they only heard him sigh in response. He then unhurriedly told them, "This is the third habit that they've formed. Despite there being few of us, none of them actually knows of our combat capability. They're not sure if 10, 20, 30, or more men are enough to face us." Thus, when they split up just now, although it made perfect sense to divide their force evenly, they deemed it as a rather risky method and instead chose to give up the rook to save the king, randomly assigning 2 or 3 men to serve as lookout on the mountain peak while the rest of them concentrate on searching for us. This way, even if those men they've left behind are killed off, they will only lose a few points, giving them the chance to recover from a potential loss. If they have predicted the possibility of us assassinating the 2 or 3 men left behind, wouldn't they set up an ambush for us over there as well? Royal God Call opined. That's a sound question, and the reason for why we are currently in this forest. So, do the enemies seem to have set up an ambush for us up there? Royal God Call was instantly speechless. The enemies quickly left the mountain peak after rushing up there in an equally orderly fashion as before. None of them appeared to be doing any covert motion that could be interpreted as them having set up an ambush atop the mountain. Their search will most likely prioritize places like the forests and blind spots of that mountain's vantage point. Since this forest is the closest to that mountain, won't they make their way over here first? Brother Assist asked, alarmed. As young Master Han nodded his head, War Without Wounds asked this with a tinge of doubt in his voice, "Are we climbing up the trees again?" While it appeared to be relatively safe when they had employed that PvP maneuver against Waterflower mercenary group in the last match, they realized afterward that that had only been due to the enemies being at their wits' end, with Gufei constantly changing position using blink and conducting sneak attacks using AO spells from within the treetops. "No, the method we used that day won't work today. There are certain conditions for that to work, and the forest we are currently in simply do not meet those. We just can't hide people within the tree lines here," young Master Han rejected. Indeed, the forest they were presently in was rather small in size, and the trees were not dense enough to allow players to hide within them. While they could hide themselves from prying eyes at a distance, Any nearby players looking up from beneath the trees would easily spot them. Let's quickly vacate this place. We will promptly be spotted if they get any closer to us. The opponents were already halfway down the mountain when young Master Han began to lead them away from their position within the forest. This way. Won't the people on the mountain peak spot us if we exit the forest like this? Brother Assist was fretting as usual. Young Master Han simply smiled at him. Everyone was already used to his stinginess at divulging his tactic, and since they knew that this particular arrangement of his would more or less be dangerous, none of them asked any further questions. Following him out of the forest, the view from the mountaintop temporarily became obstructed. Young Master Han led the five along the tree lines for some time before the remnant of a half wall appeared in front of them. Young Master Han made his way behind the wall and beckoned the rest to join him. Everyone bewilderedly followed suit. The wall perfectly blocked the view from the mountain peak, and War Without Wounds could not help but ask with incredulity, "Did you happen to draw this map or something?" "We'll talk about that later," young Master Han said instead as he led the group once more. While the wall stretched for some distance, its varying degree of disuse had the 6 men crouching as they advanced forward. In fact, they even had to occasionally crawl. All in all, everyone trailed after young Master Han while employing the appropriate stance to get them across. When the path ahead suddenly dipped, young Master Han faced backward to say in an undertone, "Move faster." With that, he rolled down a depression. The others advanced toward the land. Depression did not look any better. When it was Sword Demon and Goofei's turn, the former activated his stealth and sauntered his way down while the latter used his blink and appeared in the land depression. The two smirked at the others. The 4 did not bother to react to their antics. War Without Wounds once more asked young Master Han, "Did you actually draw this map?" They knew that this was improbable, but young Master Han's knowledge of the wall that conveniently blocked the view of the people atop the mountain made them think otherwise. Young Master Han languidly replied, "Keen observation." He considered this to be a sufficient answer to War Without Wounds' question. "So where do we go from here?" Brother Assist's eyes were drawn toward the road that lay before them. "We are almost at the mountain base. We'll just wait for most of the enemies to leave before we proceed further," young Master Han replied. "Have you already observed all this?" "It's not observation per se, but something I've found." Young Master Han had that educating expression on his face. "Upon checking the mountain's altitude and surrounding terrain, I noticed that this road is essentially a blind spot for the mountain." "I see." Brother Assist expressed his admiration for young Master Han's observational skills. Young Master Han was elated with his compliment, but when he saw that the other 4 were not even listening to his explanation, he could not help but feel irritated. War Without Wounds and Sword Demon were deep in their thoughts, while Goofei was more occupied with asking about Royal God Call's hand-woven straw hat. "You're pretty good with your hands. Where did you learn how to do this?" "Hee, this is not much." Royal God Call felt very pleased with himself. Young Master Han disdainfully stared at the 4 men and said, "We'll sneak up the mountain once the men have advanced further. Since this is a blind spot of that mountain, won't they come over and search this place as well?" Brother Assist asked. "This blind spot is hardly noticeable. They are bound to miss this spot from up there." Just as young Master Han said this, his eyes shone with anger upon seeing something. "Miles, keep yourself hidden. Stay to that side." His plan was almost ruined by the dolt's careless action. Translocation, blank. Goofei chanted to change his position even as he continued to talk with the Royal God Call. "How did you weave this part here?" "Oh, it's like this." "Then, you do this." Royal God Call took the straw hat from Goofei and started explaining the weaving process to the latter. Chapter 257, Blossoming Crimson Lotus. The 6 men of young Master's elite stayed hidden in the land depression for quite some time. Just as young Master Han had surmised, none of the Black Hand's mercenaries had come over to search their current location. Young Master Han jerked his head slightly when it was time and everyone proceeded forward. The road truly brought the men right at the base of the mountain. This was when young Master Han suddenly stopped. "Well, why did you stop moving?" The rest hissed at him. Crawling on the ground after a while became very tiresome, so they were looking forward to reaching their destination fast. Young Master Han pointed forward. "The blind spot ends in this stretch. We'll be lucky if the enemies atop the mountain aren't looking in this direction when we sneak over. Otherwise, We risk getting discovered. Plus, the stretch is our blind spot for seeing what's happening up there. If that's the case. The rest turned their gazes on the two behind them. Young Master Han also had a smile on his face when he turned his gaze on Gu Fei and Sword Demon. You guys are pretty strong yourselves, so we'll leave it to you two to settle things. The pleasure is ours. Gu Fei pulled up Moonlit Nightfalls and performed a sword salute. Bowing his head, his right hand firmly held the sword downward while his other open palm rested on it. He walked over to where young Master Han was standing, chanted a spell, disappeared from his current position, and reappeared with a swish past the blind spot. The ever-stoic Sword Demon seemed to be rather excited as well. It was finally time for his lasting sentence Dying Breath's opening act. Unlike Gu Fei, Sword Demon was a total gamer in every sense of the word and had all the characteristics an avid gamer would have. After activating stealth, Sword Demon silently passed through the blind spot. With the rest of them left behind, young Master Han started issuing instruction on the two through the mercenary channel. Alright, just move according to my command. What followed this statement was a series of coordinates that Gu Fei and Sword Demon were very familiar with. The two followed the coordinates without hesitation and managed to make their way to the mountain, with nary a movement around them. The route young Master Han had selected for them was truly marvelous. Just say it if you need help, we'll surely come to your aid. Royal God Call typed on the mercenary channel. Hey, I doubt there will be a need for your help, Gu Fei arrogantly answered. Maintain a clean channel and keep your trash talking away from here. Young Master Han chastised. The two continued down the route young Master Han had given them, with the final 20 to 30 meters no longer providing them any sort of cover. They were almost right under the enemy's noses, and only a tunnel would provide them the longed-for cover. You'll have to solve this yourselves, young Master Han said. Let's just charge at them. What's there to think about? Gu Fei suggested. They could easily cover the distance if they sprinted. Gu Fei could even use blink along the way to reduce the distance by 5 meters. Sword Demon nodded his head in agreement. The two, who had their backs against a large boulder, exchanged looks and began counting in their minds: 1, 2, 3. The two darted from either side of the boulder. They could already make out someone's figure on the mountain peak. The person was fortunately talking to someone beside him, so he was not looking in their direction. This provided the two a chance to cover the distance of 10 meters in an instant. That was when the person on the mountain peak turned his head over with a bright smile on his lips. The two men beside the person showed astonishment over their sudden appearance, yet they recovered themselves quickly. One of them raised his hand to fire off an arrow before retreating. Archers should be acting as lookouts of the Black Hand on that mountain. Young Master Han had already anticipated this. Since archers had access to Eagle Eye, were capable of ranged attacks, and had fast movement speed, they could at least escape the enemy's attacks and stall for time in the worst-case scenario. Indeed, the man atop the mountain was an archer. Once he spotted Gu Fei and Sword Demon, the archer even activated homing projectile right away. The arrow glowed white as it flew toward Gu Fei. It seemed that the opponent really intended to insta-kill the mage first. Unfortunately for the archer, his feeble shot could not even hold Gu Fei back. Casually lifting Moonlit Nightfalls before his chest, Gu Fei employed his Gu family sword style, Yi Zan Ba Feng. Not only could this technique receive an attack from the front, it could also do so from other directions. The technique allowed him to instantly attack the enemy at the most efficient angle. This arrow coming straight toward him was struck off its course by a light twist of his wrist, not even slowing his forward momentum. Rather, it was Sword Demon who had unwittingly slowed his sprint for a bit to admire Gu Fei's sword control. Nonetheless, the arrow did nothing to stop the two's swift advance toward the mountain peak. 3 players were on the mountain peak, and they were prepared for any upcoming skirmish. Young Master Han's assumption about the lookouts being all archers was a little off. Based on their equipment, the 3 players before them were an archer, a fighter, and a mage respectively. What was odd was that these 3 men went as far as to cover their faces. Did that archer have his face covered just then? Gu Fei asked Sword Demon. I don't know, I wasn't focusing on his face. The two were busy feeling elated that the archer had his back on them just then, so all they saw was the whitish glow from the homing projectile skill when the enemy released it. As for his face, the more Gu Fei struggled to recall it, the more he felt that the man had a piece of cloth covering his face all along. However, This was not the time to ask, why are their faces covered? The two came here to launch a sneak attack on the three enemy players, so their priority was to end this fight as fast as they could. Only a fool would waste time asking unimportant questions at such a crucial moment. Gufei and Sword Demon rushed toward the three men from left and right. The archer and fighter happened to be situated before the mage, each guarding his sides. Instantly, the two moved to the left and right, as if they intended to trap Gufei and Sword Demon within by forming a triangle around them. As a kung fu practitioner, Gufei could easily predict and discern moves beyond moves in great detail. While the two men's actions seemed to be done to surround them, the distance they created was further than necessary. It made total sense for an archer to distance himself from his targets to attack, yet it was difficult to understand why a fighter would do the same. With a fleet-foot skill that granted him faster speed than Gufei, Sword Demon was able to close in on the mage. He then unsheathed a glistening dagger, which Gufei could clearly tell was lasting sentence. It seemed that Sword Demon was very eager to begin his weapon's opening act. The mage did not get flustered and merely raised his magic staff to cast a spell. The archer and fighter on either side stopped running, yet they did not attack either. Instead, they turned to look at their mage companion together. Only the veteran combatant Gufei was able to register the minute discrepancy in their enemies' movements. A shocking thought flashed through his mind and he promptly warned Sword Demon, "Quickly retreat." In the same instant that he said this, he uttered the incantation for blink and teleported himself 5 meters away. This was when the mage completed his chant, a flaming spark burst forth from his magic staff, and an intense fire blossomed like a flower the moment it touched the ground. This was the signature spell of Parallel Worlds #1 Mage, Drifting, Blossoming Crimson Lotus. No wonder these men were covering their faces. It was so that Gufei would not recognize them. The archer and fighters moved to dart to the side when the fighting began now made perfect sense. They were leaving the AO of Blossoming Crimson Lotus. Gufei cast blink seconds faster than Blossoming Crimson Lotus, allowing him to escape its burning deluge a few steps back. As for Sword Demon, without an instantaneous movement skill like blink, his immediate retreat upon Gufei's warning was still not faster than the unfolding petals of the Crimson Lotus. Gufei chanted another spell once he saw Sword Demon's perilous situation. In that very moment, an electrically charged wall erected itself right before Sword Demon. Gufei released the spell using the Kung Fu method for unleashing hidden weapons. Gufei instantly calculated the blossoming Crimson Lotus's movement and expanding speed and placed the electric wall precisely between Sword Demon and the cascading flames. The spell description says electric wall can block everything, right? Show me this blocking capability right now. Gufei anxiously yelled inside him. This was the limit of what he could do right now. This sudden change was something even their opponents had not expected. Most spells would be out of the mage's control once they were cast. Blossoming Crimson Lotus was actually blocked when the flames collided into electric wall, creating a clear path behind it from what would have been a patch of raging flames 360 degrees of the mage. The skill description stated that the wall of electricity could last for 20 seconds, yet the relentless flames battering the wall only let it last for 3 seconds and swallowed it whole in the next instant. Although the fire of blossoming Crimson Lotus surged forth with renewed intensity after being blocked for 3 seconds and engulfed the empty space before it, it was already too late. Gufei's electric wall bought Sword Demon enough time to escape the danger zone. Gufei deeply exhaled in relief as he stood beside Sword Demon. The three men looked at the two in utter disbelief. The mage in the middle of that patch of intense fire took off the cloth covering his face. Indeed, the man was drifting. They said, "You're a close combat mage with exceptional melee capabilities, yet you've bested me from that exchange of spells just then." Drifting spoke. Gufei laughingly said, "That was close. But it's not over yet." Drifting laughed as well. "Of course." Gufei abruptly turned around and sent his sword cleaving outward, causing a thief to fade into view in an effort to dodge his attack. Gufei did not power his strike with a spell, so the resulting damage was only minimal despite the cleave connecting perfectly to the target. "Looks like it's not just rumors that you have a counter for stealth," Drifting remarked. "Turns out that the players on this mountain peak are not 3 but 4, Gufei commented in return. Left hand of love and right hand of cool had also taken off the pieces of cloth covering their faces. The 2 versus 4 fight was on the cusp of starting. Chapter 258, The useless Icy Mirage skill. There were still errors in young Master Han's deduction. The opponents had indeed split their force unevenly, but they had not given up the rook just to save the king. The reason behind his erroneous deduction was the lack of information about the enemies. Young Master Han nationally did not consider the possibility of the opposing mercenary group to have one of the 5 unyielding experts. The Black Hand had specifically entrusted Drifting of guarding this mountain's vantage point to directly challenge young Master's elite for control. Indeed, had it not been for Gufei's split-second realization and coincidental acquisition of Electric Wall before today's match, he and Sword Demon might have become casualties of Drifting's blossoming Crimson Lotus. Sword Demon could still feel the lingering fear in him. He and Gufei stood back to back as the 4 opponents encircled them in a diamond formation. Blossoming Crimson Lotus's fiery glow was too eye-catching and acted like a beacon to those in the distance. Be it the Black Hand or young Master's elite, both sides could tell that something was currently happening on the mountaintop. The Black Hand mercenary group seemed to have an accord, as the members unanimously stopped searching the forest and rushed back to the mountaintop like moths drawn to the flame. The other members of young Master's elite, which were situated by the foot of the mountain, also sprinted up the steep slope when they saw the flash of light that engulfed the mountaintop. What was that just now? Brother Assist bewilderedly asked. The fiery afterglow did not seem to be from the 2 no-neo spells of mages in the current stage of the game. None of those present had any clue on what that was either, so they could only pose this question on the mercenary channel. It's Drifting. When it came to online messaging, Sword Demon was the most practiced and managed to reply almost instantly. Oh. Royal God Call perked up. I remember Miles telling me about Drifting's crazy, overbearing spell that comes from his magic staff. What spell is this? Everyone asked. TSK. Why would I deign to remember the name of such garbage spell? Royal God Call disdainfully said, yet he thought inside, Blossoming Crimson Lotus. The spell sounds awfully powerful. Both parties rushed up the mountain, with young Master's elite naturally being faster since they were nearer. Meanwhile, back on the mountaintop, the fight was already in full swing. Sword Demon intended to activate stealth with Gufei giving him cover, yet Drifting swiftly reacted to this by lifting his hand, preparing to send a flame wheel crushing down the moment Sword Demon disappeared from view. Gufei and Sword Demon were experienced PvPers by now, so evading the spell just as the Mage Drifting raised his hand to chant was easy. When the fire began to take form above them, the 2 men darted out, one going to the left while the other heading forward. Sword Demon ran toward the archer Right Hand of Cool, while Gufei dashed toward Parallel World's top Mage Drifting. Right Hand of Cool promptly distanced himself from Sword Demon. He was no fool to let a thief get near him like this. Sword Demon's fleet foot was on cooldown after just using it. Without the skill's speed boost, a thief's movement speed was slightly slower than that of an archer. Although Sword Demon had Windchaser's boots, their speed was not that too far off, making it impossible for him to promptly catch up to the archer. Sword Demon also saw through Right Hand of Cool's intention, so he readily changed his target and dove straight toward Drifting as well. The 2 would appear to be playing some sort of game to anybody watching, with Sword Demon trying to catch Right Hand of Cool and choosing to target Drifting, instead when he could not catch up to Right Hand of Cool. While Sword Demon actions seemed whimsical, the Mage Drifting's lack of protector at the moment made them sound. Gufei, for his part, felt that Drifting's precarious situation was an oversight likely created due to him and Sword Demon unexpectedly escaping Blossoming Crimson Lotus's AO moments ago. A weapon skill had 2 characteristics. First, it was not bound by proficiency. Unlike the player's skill tree, the power of a weapon skill was not restricted by its familiarity or constant usage to become powerful. Second, it often had long cooldown. Gufei and Sword Demon believed that Blossoming Crimson Lotus was not likely to explode this soon once more, so they chose to rush to Drifting. Drifting was unfazed by this. Placing the magic staff horizontally across his chest, he chanted, Icy Mirage. Split. Yet another unknown spell. Gufei and Sword Demon mumbled to themselves, not feeling the least bit surprised. These experts clearly had far more prosperous lives than the members of Young Master's elite, Many scrolls and several wondrous equipment were at their disposal. Gufei thought back to Brave Surge's frozen ice trail skill. Its icy path was pretty cool looking. Sword Demon was more cautious this time. With the unleashing of an unknown spell, he promptly stopped his advance. Meanwhile, Gufei continued his forward dash with a devil-may-care attitude. He intended to slice Drifting up with his sword no matter what appeared this time. After casting Electric Wall and Blink, his mana was only enough for Twin Incineration and either Fireball or Thunderbolt. Gufei might be unable to insta-kill Drifting if the latter had high magic defense, but he was confident that his sword could at least cut up the mage to his death. Gufei continued to charge forward while maintaining vigilance. He still needed to react appropriately to Drifting's spell. After all, snow fell around Drifting for a moment, making his figure appear somewhat illusory as he finished his incantation. The snow soon dissipated and Drifting revealed an innocuous smile. Sword Demon felt quite aggrieved when the spell did not inflict any damage upon its appearance. He even wondered just what nonsense Drifting was up to. Gufei was forced to stop in his tracks when he realized that they were surrounded. To be precise, he and Sword Demon were surrounded by several Driftings. An identical Drifting stood on each of the four corners. Arctic Whirlwind, Spin. The four Driftings did the same motion, sounded the same, and unleashed a similar spell, Arctic Whirlwind, that whirled toward Gufei from four different directions. This sort of body duplication skill was common in various MMOs. Whether the duplicates could inflict damage was dependent on the skill design itself. Nevertheless, the real Drifting was undoubtedly among the four Driftings that had just unleashed Arctic Whirlwind before them. While this sort of skill would be difficult to discern in a PvP setting, Drifting was unfortunately up against Gufei right now. Using his infallible ability to detect killing intent, Gufei promptly learned who the real Drifting was among the four. Had Drifting gathered all his duplicates together in one spot after casting the spell, Gufei would have been unable to pinpoint him through killing intent alone, as the feeling would have come from the same general direction. Drifting's desire to show off the spell's oppressive might had him placing his duplicates on each corner of the target, which in turn allowed Gufei to determine the true Drifting. Translocation, Blink. Gufei appeared right behind Drifting with a point of his finger, instantly striking the latter. Drifting's Icy Mirage spell was a sustained skill. His duplicates would not disappear just because he was under attack. Still, Drifting felt very shocked that Gufei had been able to identify the real him in an instant. Even if he blindly guessed who the real Drifting was, there was only a 25% chance of success. And yet, Gufei teleported himself right behind the real Drifting and gave him a slash with utmost confidence. Drifting looked backward in shock when the sword struck him. Gufei, meanwhile, was smiling at him innocuously. "This is no good." The weird effect of Icy Mirage was in full display to everyone present as well. When Drifting turned to look at Gufei, his three duplicates did the same as well, causing Left Hand of Love, Right Hand of Cool, and another member of the Black Hand to feel creep out. The duplicates would copy the exact movement of the original body. Icy Mirage, huh? Gotta remember this. Sword Demon said as he watched the whole situation unfold on the sidelines. Evidently, he considered that as a possible flaw of Icy Mirage, and a severe one at that. If anyone was conscientious enough, it was possible to identify the real caster through this. Gufei cleaved Drifting for the second time at this point. His mana was depleted with his use of Blink, so he could only slash at Drifting with basic attacks. Had this been a duel, Drifting would have been in an utterly precarious state. Thankfully, he had his companions with him. Once they saw his dire situation, each of them strove to extend a helping hand. Right Hand of Cool fired off an arrow on homing projectile to Gufei, while Left Hand of Love went to engage Sword Demon. The remaining thief bravely bounded toward Gufei as well. Gufei wished to quickly dispose of Drifting, so he simply ignored homing projectile, which had a particularly weak attack power and could not be used to deal main damage, and continued to assault Drifting. Right Hand of Cool's move was akin to the stratagem used to besiege Wei in an effort to rescue Zhou Superscript 1. While Drifting remained alive even with the third slash, he could not escape Gufei's fierce assault, either. Any attempt of his to cast spells was efficiently interrupted by Gufei as well. Although the thief ran over as fast as he could, he was not faster than Gufei's hail of attacks on Drifting. The man could no longer hope for salvation, Yet he actually smiled at this dire moment. Following this, he uttered, "Blossoming Crimson." Blossoming Crimson Lotus's cooldown was apparently not as long as they had assumed. Still, what was the point of chanting the spell if it could be interrupted? Gufei's mind worked at an unparalleled speed. Instead of slashing at Drifting like usual, Gufei's free hand reached out at lightning fast speed to forcefully cover Drifting's mouth just as he said, "Lotus." Drifting wore a dumbfounded expression on his face, having not expected Gufei to use such a method to stop his chanting. Gufei's strength might be weak against most players, but he was at an advantage when it came to his fellow mage, Drifting. Thus, Gufei managed to pin him down to the ground in the next moment. "If I loosen my grip, will his shout of Unfold make the spell work?" Gufei did not have enough gaming knowledge to answer this question, so he dared not risk testing this out. While he felt rather vexed by his action, Drifting was even more aggrieved by it. "Just what in the world is going on?" A new voice could be heard asking this. Young Masters Elite that had finally arrived on the mountain felt very perplexed at the sight of the four Driftings. What baffled them even more was the sight of Gufei pinning one Drifting to the ground. Chapter 259, A Vicious Cycle of Death. "Stop with your nonsense and give me a hand." Young Master Han's focus was on the rest of the Black Hand mercenary group that was heading toward this mountain's vantage point and did not even register Drifting and the other players presently with him. "Drifting, let's have a death match." Royal Godcall quickly issued this challenge as he rushed forward before stopping in his tracks and asking, "Wait, which one are you?" Being an expert gamer himself, he easily figured out what was going on and knew that the many Driftings before him were the products of a duplication spell of sort. Still, Royal Godcall reckoned it would be satisfying to vent his frustration on all the four Driftings. "Bullshit, you clearly know which one it is," Gufei shouted, irked. Royal Godcall's question was really silly. Anyone with half a brain would be able to tell at a glance that Gufei had the real Drifting pinned down upon seeing the three duplicates struggling on the ground without anyone pinning them down. It would be too undignified of the real Drifting to fake this one so thoroughly. After adding 2 and 2 together, Royal Godcall cheerfully ran over to Gufei. He then chortled at Drifting, "PFFFT. What a blab. To think I'd see the day you would be in this state." Gufei felt like cursing the idiotic brat. He only had meager strength as a mage. Currently, Gufei was exerting all of it to keep Drifting pinned down. If his arm slackened even a bit, it would naturally result to Drifting managing to complete his incantation. Royal Godcall was still laughing with mad glee when the enemy thief rushed in and Right Hand of Cool fired off an arrow. Royal Godcall recovered himself enough to return fire at Right Hand of Cool after dodging the latter's arrow. He was quick-witted enough to recognize that engaging a thief in melee was disadvantageous despite being an expert and decided to focus on contending with Right Hand of Cool at long range. Damn! Gufei was infuriated by Royal Godcall's act of abandoning him. He had no way to deal with the thief as his hands were still covering Drifting's mouth. Gufei was absolutely disgruntled for getting himself into such a quandary now that Royal Godcall was no longer around to lend him a hand. If he freed Drifting's mouth, he would still be in trouble in the event that the latter completed his incantation. Fortunately, some members of Young Masters Elite were rather reliable in times of crisis like this. When Royal Godcall was lured away by Right Hand of Cool, War Without Wounds bodily slammed the thief using charge and plunged his claymore to the enemy's waist diagonally just as Gufei was about to be stabbed by the thief. A pain-filled scream escaped the thief's lips as he was hurtled outward with a collision. He was right beside the mountainside, so he ended up tumbling down the steep slope. His scream echoed all the way down to the base of the mountain. Those on the mountain momentarily stopped their fighting to look down the mountain. "That's very cruel," Left Hand of Love remarked. "Yeah." Sword Demon nodded his head in agreement. "It's too much." Royal Godcall quipped. "It's not intentional," War Without Wounds feebly explained. He used charge at that moment since he deemed it to be the most suitable method to alleviate the situation. In the distance, the rest of the Black Hand mercenary group heard the blood-curdling scream of the thief tumbling down the mountain and stopped in their tracks to talk about it. "What was that?" someone asked with trepidation. "Sounds like a ferocious beast. Could it be a bet? Parallel World has bets?" I'll discuss the matter as they continued climbing up the mountain. While the rest were viewing the thief's journey to the foot of the mountain, The infuriated Gufei remained occupied with keeping Drifting pinned down. He could only do this for fear of the latter successfully casting Blossoming Crimson Lotus. The others listened to the thief's scream echo about for a bit before realizing that they were in the middle fighting with one another. Left Hand of Love was currently beside Sword Demon, so the two promptly began exchanging blows in rapid succession. Royal God Call was beside Right Hand of Cool, and both pulled away from each other before firing arrows at each other back and forth. War Without Wounds returned to Gufei's side to help him get rid of Drifting, yet a Royal God Call anxiously shouted, "No! Leave that guy to me! Go to fucking hell!" It's crunch time. Gufei could no longer hold himself back from cursing Royal God Call. He was always minding his language due to his profession as a teacher back in reality, but life happened to deal him a poor hand this time around. Gufei's sudden use of foul language only highlighted his struggle at the moment, so why would War Without Wounds not lend him a hand? Royal God Call seemed to have vowed to take down Drifting himself. When he saw War Without Wounds ignoring his cry to stay his hand, he decidedly yelled out, "Young master!" Ignoring Right Hand of Cool, he fired off an arrow on snipe at the pin Drifting. Wahahaha! Trash! You've finally been defeated by my hands. You are still miles from being up to my standard. Royal God Call was feeling very elated at an unimaginable level for having the chance to insta-kill Drifting, although the latter had already lost some HP from Gufei's slashes and had been unable to put up resistance with his pinned down position. Left Hand of Love was firing arrows at Royal God Call all this while, but young Master Han was timely bestowing heal on Royal God Call in response to that. Against the combined might of 6 elites that included a priest, Left Hand of Love and Right Hand of Cool were not foolish enough to fight a losing battle. Right Hand of Cool fired off a final arrow on homing projectile toward Royal God Call before making his way down the mountain, while Left Hand of Love tried to disengage from his fierce fight with Sword Demon but to no avail. The thief Sword Demon possessed faster movement speed than his, after all. With the idol brother assist providing additional support to Sword Demon, Left Hand of Love met his demise soon after. Right Hand of Cool's fast movement speed brought him almost 1/3 down the mountain in a short duration. Royal God Call wanted to give chase, but young Master Han stopped him from doing so. The enemies are almost here. Let's get out of here. The Black Hands players were indeed closing in on them as they spoke. Gufei did not even have time to munch on an apple as he followed the rest down the mountain. Drifting sent him a message at this point, glumly saying, "I can't believe you did that." "I've got no choice, your magic attack power is just too high," Gufei replied. "The next time you do that, I'll bite your hand off." Drifting said, "No, you won't. You're the #1 mage, there's no way you would do such an ungentlemanly behavior." Gufei chuckled. He felt slightly bemused by this. Would Drifting have been able to sound the word Lotus while biting him just then? Young Master's elite rushed down the mountain. This mountain peak assault could be considered as a success, since they managed to earn themselves 3 kill points. Drifting might be up, but he was still just a point to the system. The 6 men once more hid in the land depression after descending the mountain. Gufei took this chance to rest and recuperate. As Gufei was about to fish out a piece of fruit, he recalled that his left palm still had Drifting saliva from covering the latter's mouth. Feeling disgusted, he temporarily returned Moonlit Nightfalls into his dimensional pocket and used his right hand to eat the fruit. Instead, "Where to now?" Brother Assist asked. "Nowhere. We're going to wait here," young Master Han answered. "Huh?" "When they can't find us on the mountain peak, they'll have no choice but to continue their search for us on the ground. Since this is a blind spot to that vantage point, they'll be forced to search again in the areas they've searched before. Leaving 2 or 3 players on the mountaintop, they will descend to the ground once more, and then, seriously? It can't be that easy, right?" They could tell where young Master Han was going with this. Using this blind spot by the foot of the mountain, they could trap the Black Hand in a vicious cycle of death. Young Master's elite would keep killing the few members the Black Hand would leave behind while the rest searched for the 6 of them, rendering this whole match in a loop. "Wouldn't that let us wipe them out after several rounds of this?" Royal God Call asked, feeling incredulous. "If they were NPCs, we would surely wipe them out like so," young Master Han stated, saying, "Since they are actual human beings, if they have the brains, they'll surely guess our intention to attack them once more." "That's true. They cannot split their force evenly, and leaving 3 or 5 men atop the mountain is akin to gifting us free kill points. After all, even the number 1 mage drifting was unable to fight us off, so what sort of action do you guys think they'll take? Young Master Han asked. As they expectantly waited for him to tell them the answer, he said, "Stay tuned." Fuck. All felt infuriated when young Master Han left them hanging. Actually, young Master Han did not intentionally keep mum about this. He just had no way of guessing what sort of desperate measure the enemies would take now that they were currently stuck between a rock and a hard place. His unfamiliarity with the opponents provided him no avenue to grasp their way of thinking. He had of course thought of several actions that they would likely take, so he could only wait and see what their decision would be before employing an appropriate countermeasure. The Black Hands players panted from the effort of rushing back to this mountaintop from the distance, yet the 6 men were already long gone. They looked at every direction from the mountain peak and only spotted a lone figure blankly kneeling in a patch of grassland below. Upon inquiring, they learned that it was Right Hand of Cool. He ran down the mountain as they struggled to climb up. Any average mercenary groups would lose their patience when faced with this sort of fighting style that seemed to toy with the opponents, but the Black Hands mercenaries were tempered through repeated missions set by the absolutely wicked system. This was nothing when compared to the abuse that they had suffered from the almighty system. As expected, the Black Hand was smart enough to guess that young Master's elite would attempt another sneak attack. They knew that it was necessary to leave people to serve as lookouts on the mountain, but leaving 3 or 4 men was not enough, so they instead had everyone stay behind. Everyone, stay. Zioxy, Zioying. The Black Hands group leader casually chose several men. "You guys, choose a forest each and carefully search through it. Report back immediately if you discover anything." "Roger." The members acknowledged the command, went down the mountain, and headed toward different directions. Chapter 260, Lure the Tiger Away from the Mountain. The Black Hands members tasked to search for young Master's elite went down the mountain, while the rest of the players stayed on the mountain and animatedly discussed the matter at hand. Those who were not exactly the brightest crayons in the box sighed, "This is great. We should have done this from the start. No point in sending everyone to search for the enemies when we can just wait here for news." Group leader Black Index finger-eyed these foolish players rather contemptuously. "It's pointless to do that since the enemies will just either kill or avoid our lone scout." "Then, why are we doing it now?" the members asked, nonplussed. Black Index finger laughed at the profundity of his decision, gazed at a certain figure climbing up the mountain, and replied, "I'll fill everyone in soon." The person presently climbing up the mountain was the remaining player of the 4-man team that had guarded this vantage point earlier, Right Hand of Cool. He immediately headed to Black Index finger once he got back to the mountain peak. "Come, tell us in detail what happened earlier." Black Index finger gathered everyone to listen to Right Hand of Cool's account of what had happened moments ago and analyze it together. "There are 2 points we can gather from this." Black Index finger raised 2 fingers after hearing Right Hand of Cool's account. "First, our opponents can observe our movement, allowing them to attack us at the right moment." As everyone nodded in agreement, he continued, "Second, there's a path that allows them to get here without anyone seeing them." All looked down the mountain slope, as if searching for some secret path that had eluded them all this while. "Did they dash in from somewhere around here?" Black Index finger pointed to a particular side of the mountain as he asked this question to Right Hand of Cool. Right Hand of Cool nodded his head, as that was truly where he had first discovered Gufei and Sword Demon. "Where did they appear from?" Black Index finger asked. Right Hand of Cool pointed to a large boulder. 2 of them suddenly appeared from behind that boulder. Everyone was suddenly seized by anxiety. Could they still be hiding there right now? Right under our very noses? That's why people say that the most dangerous place is actually the safest. Everyone whispered this to one another. Black Index finger did not actually think that their enemies were bold enough to hide behind such a conspicuous location, but after hearing his men's words, he felt that there was a slim possibility of their enemies being outrageous enough to do just that. Could they have chosen to hide in that spot precisely because of its improbability? Thinking that it was better to be safe than sorry, Black Index Finger ordered some archers to ready their arrows for any fleeing targets and a few mages to cast AO spells on that boulder. The mages' flame wheels struck the rock until it was entirely lit aflame, finally relieving them of the worry that their enemies were hiding behind it. He then had some of his men investigate the surrounding flora and fauna and behind the huge boulder for any hiding players. This is where you saw the opponents appear from, and they immediately began attacking you guys after. Black Index Finger touched the boulder as he continued, "None of you discovered any sign of movement before this point?" "Yes." Right Hand of Cool affirmed, "I barely blinked my eyes back then when they appeared from behind that boulder out of nowhere." Actually, Right Hand of Cool had been chatting to the person beside him when Goofy and Sword Demon appeared. He had definitely not been conscientious enough to keep himself from blinking back then, either. Right Hand of Cool had in fact not seen Sword Demon or Goofy appear from behind the boulder the way he claimed, but his account was more or less correct judging from the evidence gathered about the earlier situation. Black Index Finger looked down the mountain with his back against the boulder. Can this huge boulder block the line of sight of someone up here all the way down the mountain? I seriously doubt it. They couldn't possibly use that method even if it's possible. I wasn't exactly standing still opposite to this boulder all the time. I was often walking around, Right Hand of Cool said. So for you to not have seen them at all. Black Index Finger and several other men looked around them and saw trees and rocks that could possibly obscure the player's line of sight from up here. Looks like they've used some cover to make their way up here. Getting back to the point, there was only a mage with blink and a thief with stealth the first time around. They are the only ones in Young Master's Elite capable of using the sparse cover to climb up here without any of you noticing. When they got to this large boulder, there's no more cover left for them ahead, so they could only dash to you guys at the fastest speed. Black Index Finger analyzed thoroughly. All nodded their heads in agreement. If they truly wish to launch a surprise attack again, they'll definitely repeat what they have done earlier. I believe they're not far from us right now. When the surrounding players heard Black Index Finger's analysis, they looked all the way down the mountainside and gazed at all the things obstructing their view, imagining seeing through their 6 shameless and devious enemies. Continue searching the forests. Leave some men on this mountain peak and pay special attention to this direction. The rest of you, follow me down the mountain to begin searching for our enemies once more, Black Index Finger commanded. Aren't we just giving them the chance to launch a surprise attack on us again? Someone asked. We won't be going far this time. We'll just search around the base of the mountain. If they dare assault the men left behind on this mountain, I'd love to see how they plan to escape us this time around. Black Index Finger chuckled. After leaving several players on the mountain, Black Index Finger led the remaining 70 or so players down the path that they suspected the men of Young Master's Elite had taken. The Black Hands players carefully searched through all the possible hiding spots along the way. Each spot only seemed to lead them closer to the hiding place of Young Master's Elite. Just as the Black Hands members were no more than several meters away from Young Master Han and everyone else's hiding spot, the system suddenly announced that Young Master's Elite had obtained another kill point. The Black Hand had lost yet another man. Who's killed? Black Index Finger hurriedly checked the list of names. It's Zioying, over there. Black Index Finger quickly gathered his men to rush toward the small forest. He specifically assigned each scout to a certain area for the purpose of reacting at the fastest speed in the case that their enemies made a move against one of his men. Zioying, how did you die? The others asked him for further details on the mercenary channel as they ran toward his assigned location. I was searching the forest when I heard the sound of an arrow flying toward me. Just as I spotted the archer, the thief snuck up behind me and executed backstab on me. And then, I was dead. Everyone, hurry! Don't let them get away. Black Index Finger urged his men faster as he led them into the small forest. Players on the mountain peak, take note of the forest we are heading toward and immediately inform us of any movement. Roger. The players on the mountain peak focus their attention on the indicated location for any unusual movement. Soon, Black Index Finger and his men arrived just outside the forest. Just as they were about to enter the forest, the players on the mountain peak reported, 2 men of the opposing mercenary group just exited the forest. 2? Just 2 men? Black Index Finger asked them to confirm this information. That's right. They are both running very fast. We can't tell what their job classes are, they affirmed. Even with the archer's eagle eye, it was still very difficult to determine the two men's job classes in the distance. Are we chasing them? Someone inquired. Black Index Finger confidently laughed. They are trying to lure the tiger away from the mountain. Superscript 1. Besides the thief and archer and young master's elite, their mage also has fast movement speed. It's impossible for the other three members to escape now that we have them surrounded, which is precisely why the two players are trying to lure us away from their group's hiding spot. Hee. Unfortunately for them, I won't fall for their trick. Let's enter the forest. I'm certain there are still people hiding inside. Wait. If they know the difficulty of escaping this forest after exposing themselves, why did they risk it just to kill Zioing? Someone asked, puzzled. This forest is too small to hide all 6 of them. My guess is that they've got no choice, Black Index Finger replied as he brought dozens of his men into the forest. This forest was truly a very small cluster of trees. They effortlessly searched the place with over 70 men of theirs, yet they soon discovered that there was no one else in the forest aside from themselves. Black Index Finger's expression became extremely unsightly at the moment. Luring the tiger away from the mountain stratagem, huh? Someone mocked their group leader. This was only a game, so none here would earnestly represent the relationship dynamics between a superior and a subordinate. Where did those two guys run off to? Black Index Finger had no choice but to ask this question on the mercenary channel. At least, they would know the fleeing direction of the two. We've kept an eye on them all this while. Someone on the mountain peak reported. Give us the enemy's direction, begin pursuit, and intercept them. This command was given to the team on the mountain peak. The Black Hands players had specially trained themselves in the pursuit and interception maneuver for the purpose of countering Young Master's elite's grand kiting strategy. Roger that. The players on the mountain peak answered. Just as they were about to send them the direction and order, someone else on the team blurted out, "Oh, fuck, someone is coming." Just as the person uttered these words, the entire mercenary channel underwent an upheaval. Stunned, Black Index Finger quickly asked, "Who's up there?" "It's the mage." These were the final words of the team on the mountain peak to Black Index Finger. Just what sort of expert was Goofy? The players on the mountain peak were nowhere near drifting skill. Goofy rushed up the mountain and instantly sent these men out of the PvP arena with Twin Incineration and Thunderbolt. Young Master's elite earned yet another 3 kill points. The Black Hands players were routed to the spot when they received this system notification. This happened just as they stepped out of the small forest to pursue and intercept the 2 men of Young Master's elite. Without that team on the mountain acting as lookout, Young Master Han was no longer worried about exposing his position. Inhaling the cool breeze, he stood just outside the land depression. Those guys have to at least know the tiger's direction when it leaves the mountain lair. Goofy had began his journey up the mountain from the land depression once the Black Hand had rushed toward the small forest. Make haste, was Young Master Han's instruction. Translocation, blank. Goofy let his actions speak for him, immediately teleporting himself closer to the mountaintop. Young Master Han kept Goofy updated with coordinates on the mercenary channel, directing him all the way to the mountain peak. It would simply be a waste of time to depend on stealth, blink, and the natural cover around to reach the mountain peak. This was due to Blink's cooldown being a whopping 1 minute and Stealth's cooldown being extended to 3 minutes for the PvP tournaments. The entire match it would probably end before they could make their way on the mountain by just relying on those. Blink and Stealth were skills used only as a last resort. What they truly depended on was Young Master Han's coordinates and directions. Young Master Han did not consider each cover along the path individually but as a whole. This meant that Goofy might occasionally be exposed as he pressed onward, but from those atop the mountain, he was practically invisible. Furthermore, Young Master Han's previous ascent to the mountain peak let him take note of the surrounding terrain, which helped make which route to take up the mountain clearer. Everything was unfolding according to his brilliant plan. It was only a matter of time before the Black Hands players spotted the hiding place of Young Master's elite with their thorough search. Hence, Young Master Han promptly sent Royal God Call and Sword Demon to the small forest using the same path that they had previously taken once he saw the Black Hand make its move. The poor fellow Zioing was faithfully searching for the 6 men, not knowing that he had been designated as their prey. Sword Demon and Royal God Call crept into the forest and immediately spotted the enemy scout, Zioing. The two then made short work of the enemy with their flawless coordination. When Black Index Finger received the system notification about Zioing's death, he promptly led his men over to the small forest. This action alone signified that he had fallen for young Master Han's trap and was successfully lured away from the actual mountain. By the time the Black Hand made it to the forest outskirt, Gu Fei had already reached the mountain peak. Sword Demon and Royal God Call of course fled from the forest after assassinating Zioing. They did not plan to wait for the opponents to surround and kill them. Although they would instantly expose their location to the people on the mountaintop once they exited the forest, they knew that Gu Fei would soon be on the mountain peak's team and would slay them all. Without the lookouts on the mountain peak, the Black Hand would have no way to pursue and intercept them. In terms of speed alone, young Master Han was not worried that Sword Demon or Royal God Call would lose. Who would have thought that Black Index Finger would figure out quite a bit of their lure the tiger away from the mountain plan and would choose not to pursue the two. However, he wasted precious time by searching through the forest. When he realized that no enemy was in the forest, Gu Fei was already upon the players on the mountain peak, killing them off before they could report to Black Index Finger. Sword Demon and Royal God Call's fleeing direction. About a third of the match's time had passed, and young Master's Elite was in the lead with a score of 7 against 0.